Schrödinger on the theory of evolution. Hi, my name is Wani and I am a student of philosophy at Sorbonne. Oh my god, I forgot. And today I'll be talking about Schrödinger, talking about the theory of evolution. So this video will be broken down into three parts. One, ethics. Why? You will find out why. It goes through behavior, determinism, environment, and evolution. Basically, the setup of what he believes to be, what it is that contributes to evolution. And to get his speculation, that is in the next video, but this is just the setting up. The second part of the video, I'm going to be describing Darwin and then Lamarck's theory of evolution. And the last part is the fun bit, which is how we see him deciding that he kind of sits in between both theories. And something that I found super interesting is that it reminded me of Bourdieu and how Bourdieu came up with his approach in sociology. So sociology, behavior, let's get started. Bear with the light situation. Paris is a bit moody today, so she's kind of like sunny, and then it's gonna burn me, and then she's gonna be cloudy, and then no one's gonna see anything. But anyway, so the book that we're going to reference today is Mind and Matter. So we're starting with part one, which is ethics. So in this copy, it is page 99 to page 100. At all epochs and with all peoples, the background of every ethical code, Tugendlehre, to be taken seriously has been and is self-denial, Selbstüberwindung. The teachings of ethics always assumes the form of a demand, a challenge, of a thou shalt, that is in some way opposed to our primitive will. Whence comes this particular contrast between the I will and thou shalt? Is it not absurd that I am supposed to suppress my primitive appetites, disown my true self, be different from what I really am? I am as I am. Give room to my individuality, free development to the desires that nature has planted in me. God is nature, and nature may be credited with having formed me as she wants me to be. Individualism. So before I continue, I just have a note here to add this argument about a child. Like, is a child free because they can do whatever they want? They can, whatever they feel, they express, or are they actually prisoners of their emotions? So this is one of the first things that I read in my philosophy book of notions. Unless you read French, I don't actually have a equivalent to recommend to you, but if you read French, I'll put like a photo or the name of the copy here. But essentially, under freedom, I read this and it blew my mind. And I was like, what? What is freedom? So yeah, that is something to consider here. So back to Schrödinger. But fortunately, the scientific foundation of these slogans is worm-eaten. Our insights into the becoming, das Werden, of the organisms make it easy to understand that our conscious life, I will not say shall be, but that it actually is necessarily a continued fight against our primitive ego. Ready? For our natural self, our primitive will, with its innate desire, is obviously the mental correlate of the material bequest received from our ancestors. So you think this will that you have is innately yours? No. This actually comes from your parents. It is true that a single day of one's life, nay, even any individual life as a whole, is but a minute blow of the chisel at the ever unfinished statue. The material for this transformation, the presupposition for its taking place, are of course the inheritable spontaneous mutations. However, for selection among them, the behavior of the carrier, person, of the mutation, his habits of life, are of outstanding importance and decisive influence. Here you're like determinism, free will. How much am I in control in terms of my evolution? Am I just a product of my ancestors, which is factually untrue, because if not, we would not have developed from our previous ancestors at all. But at the same time, how can you say that we are the ones who are able to have more of an active role towards our evolution? And thus, at every step, on every day of our life, as it were, something of the shape that we possessed until then has to change, to be overcome, to be deleted, and replaced by something new. The resistance of our primitive will is the psychical correlate of the resistance to the existing shape to the transforming chisel. For we ourselves are chisel and statue, conquerors and conquered at the same time. It is a true continued self-conquering, Selbstüberwindung. So now when you're thinking of ethics, you're thinking of behaviors, you're thinking of what you should do, you are no longer denying yourself of your will. And also, like, I think the thing to highlight here is like primitive will, as in like something that came before you, like the primitive will, compared to a will that belongs to you. So at once you are conquered by your self-imposition of thou shall. And he had like, more parts about Kant, but I took it out just so that it's a bit cleaner. But the idea is that if you can impose laws on top of yourself, you are the one who defines how it is that you conduct yourself, and it is in this way that you are free. Just really quickly about Kant, it's just a quick thing between categorical and hypothetical. Hypothetical is when you do something with the aims of something that could or could not happen, like hypothetically speaking. It's kind of like you are putting your chances to a lot of contingencies, a lot of like different odds of it not happening. However, with categoric, it's like I'm gonna wake up every day at 8 a.m. regardless. So that is something that you can achieve, and regardless of how you feel, regardless of what your aim is to feel, regardless of like, any other different circumstances, you are going to do this law that you impose on yourself, which is to wake up at 8 a.m. every single day, to create this like habit for yourself, to free yourself from this idea of like, oh yeah, but like, I mean, I wish I could be the type of person who wakes up at 8 a.m., but I just have all these things to do at the end of the day, and then like, I have to look after my dog, and all my friends want to see me, so then like, and all these reasons that you have that you cannot abide by this own law for yourself, that completely goes out the window. You are, regardless, no matter what, categorically going to achieve this law that you impose on yourself, so that you free yourself out of all these other conditions that will get in the way of this one thing that you can actually control, which is this choice to wake up every day at 8 a.m. This video was actually prompted by a conversation that I had with Liz, and it had to do with this idea of karma. It had to do with this idea of like cycle breaking, the capacity to actually break like generational trauma, and like, what capacity do we have in that? And I just think that it's really exciting, this idea of no longer like, oh, I can't because like in my family or whatever my culture or whatever my history, I'm just made like this. Like that's it. Like, the nature nurture argument. And this is basically saying, and again, like just really, we're not actually escaping this nature nurture argument. But what is just interesting to highlight here is that he says that we are both the conquered and the conquerors. So the conquerors in terms of the capacity of self-conquering by the capacity of self-denial, the self-denial of the primitive will, so that we can change, so that we can overcome. And then, which side is conquered and which side is conqueror is the interesting thing, right? It's like, are you conquered by the laws of, society or some external thing? Or are you conquering because you're choosing to adopt these things to break yourself out of like a different set of habits or laws or rules or societal or cultural demands. So what I'm just trying to highlight here is that our behaviors, our choices within our environment, within the laws that govern us, because at any one point you have so many things asking for your attention and so many kind of like, sermoirs like telling you like what you're supposed to do, but you are the one who actions your body into doing things. So the exciting thing for me is that our capacity to become based on what laws we choose to abide by. We cannot change these laws, but we choose which laws to abide by. And this is in relation to environment, but that's in the next video. So continuing on, part 2, I'm going to talk about Darwin's theory of evolution and then Lamarck's. Mutations occur spontaneously in the genome, the hereditary substance. You can see my first video that I made on this that talks a bit about the hereditary substance. We have reason to believe that they are mainly due to what the physicist calls a thermodynamic fluctuation. If you're wondering like why the F is he talking about biology and then physics, again, it's in my first video. Let me just say that phrase again. Mutations occur spontaneously in the genome, the hereditary substance. We have reason to believe that they are mainly due to what the physicist calls a thermodynamic fluctuation. In other words, to pure chance. So highlight that word chance and just, what are we in front of chance? We are passive. Oh my gosh, what is it? I try not to mention anything when I don't know the exact source or I don't remember the exact wording, but I don't want you to think that I come up with everything. But this is from Bergson. It's the idea of like when you shoot an arrow, like you're an archer and you're shooting the arrow, the idea is that no matter how much practice that you've put in, no matter how ready you feel for the day, no matter what you've done to actually on your behalf be ready for the Olympics, there are so many things, i.e. chance, that is in the way of you missing the mark. And there's like a specific term for it. It's like something I hope like maybe I'll help myself and I'll put it somewhere here to help me. But it's just the idea that like a bee can fly in front of your face, the wind resistance randomly like, you know, gives you a gust of wind that like pushes your arrow off course. Someone in the crowd screams, like there's so many things that you have absolutely no control over. So that is the exciting thing about life. But continuing on, the individual has not the slightest influence on the hereditary treasure it receives from its parents, nor on the one it leaves to its offspring. Mutation that occurs are acted on by natural selection of the fittest. And here it's about how nature decides. Like it doesn't matter what it is that you do. If you're not strong against the environment, you just perish and you die and then you don't propagate, and that's how your generation ends. Apart from this, surviving, begetting offspring, its activity, the organism's activity, during its lifetime seems to be biologically irrelevant. Any skill of training attained is lost. It leaves no trace. It dies with the individual. It is not transmitted. So now we move on to Lamarck's theory of evolution, which precedes Darwin. So this theory rests entirely on the assumption that any new features an individual has acquired by specific surroundings or behavior during its lifetime before procreation can be and usually are passed on to its progeny, so descendant, if not entirely, at least in traces. In the same way, the strength or skill or even substantial adaptation produced in an organ. So the example that he provided was like an animal that lives on like a rocky surface, no, it's a rocky surface, like a rocky environment. They grow calluses on their feet, and these features, the features of calloused feet, is something that will be passed on to their offspring. In an organ, by its being continually used for certain ends, would not be lost but passed on at least partly to the offspring. This is infinitely more attractive than the gloomy aspect of passivity apparently offered by Darwinism. An intelligent being which considers itself a link in the long chain of evolution may, under Lamarck's theory, be confident that its striving and efforts for improving its abilities, both bodily and mental, are not lost in the biological sense, but form a small but integrating part of the striving of the species towards higher and even higher perfection. Here we have the idea of activity, how it is that when you keep using a specific ability, it kind of, you know, when your body is like formed in a certain way due to this activity, you will pass that off into your offspring. So let's move on to part 3, which is half-half. Well, not exactly in the middle, but in between these two. So I would say on the Darwin side, we have chance, and on the Lamarck side, we have activity. So with Darwin, Team Darwin, we have, unhappily, Lamarckism is untenable. Untenable means undefendable. The fundamental assumption on which it rests, namely that acquired properties can be inherited, is wrong. Moving on. So now we're in Team Lamarck-ish. Not completely, but ish. Behavior influences selection. I will now wish to show you that this is not quite so. So I kind of skipped a lot, but essentially it's like he goes like, no, we really need like this Darwinistic aspect, but then now he's just being like, well, it's not exactly Darwin either. So without changing anything in the basic assumptions of Darwinism, we can see that the behavior of the individuals, the way it makes use of its innate faculties, plays a relevant part, nay, plays the most relevant part in evolution. There is a very true kernel in Lamarck's view, namely that there is an irrescindible causal connection between the functioning, the actually being put to profitable use of a character, an organ, any property or ability or bodily feature, and it's being developed in the course of generations and gradually improved for the purposes for which it is profitably used. So the development of this argument will be in the next video because it is really long, kind of, and it kind of deserves its own video. But I would like to leave you with this comparison. So something that I mentioned in the first video is that I really like seeing structures in different domains. So it's not about looking for a pattern of like, okay, this causes this and therefore, it's going to repeat itself or whatever. It's more of how talking maybe similar or dissimilar things in different, again, domains. So him, it's in biology, physics, sciences, can be seen in different domains. And the one that I'm going to bring up now is sociology/slash philosophy, because we're going to talk about Durkheim, Weber, and Bourdieu. And you can tell me if you see what I see. So in terms of sociology, and these are my notes from class, this is something that we quickly went through in epistemology. So it's going to be in French, so bear with me if I can't translate it properly. Essentially, with sociology, we had kind of two perspectives on what is man. Durkheim feels that man is a passive result. So what he means by that is that man is impregnated by the science of nature, the causal social force. If you don't know what this means and you're curious, I have a video that talks a lot about, or questions a lot about determinism. It was a dissertation that I wrote for my finals that I think I got like a 17. I think I presented this one in French, but essentially if you're interested in what it means, the social force, in these two videos that I'm linking below, it goes more deeply into that. Durkheim basically with this says that man is determined based on this social law. And this reminds us of the passivity in terms of how nature is the one who decides who gets to survive. You can't actually do anything about whether it is that, you pass on something that's beneficial, a beneficial, spoiler for the next video, like a beneficial mutation to your offspring so that they survive, but it's just, up to happenstance, up to chance. And this is the level of passivity that's not shared with Weber, who says that man is basically an active player. He has the role of the subject, the subjective role. He is something that acts. It is the capacity of the person to have comprehension of signification. It is in the first person, not in the third person. Again, like the first and third person, if that interests you, I have another series called, I forgot like the name of the series, but it's just like my series that has like man defines reality, or reality defines man. And I go through like the link between how it is that the way that we define reality is the way that we define man. And at the end, we reach social sciences, which is the way that we're actually dispossessed from our capacity to define ourselves. So this is a 3-part series. If that's interesting to you, it's there, but this is not what we're covering today. But essentially, man as the object of sociology is the one of action. And there are 4 types of actions. Again, it's in the first series that I mentioned. But anyway, back to this. It talks about the comportments, these 4 types of actions, talks about the comportments or the behaviors by which the agents are given an objective. So with the passivity of Durkheim, it is the social law that is the cause behind the actions of the person. Whereas for Weber, it is behind it, there's a cause, but in front of it, it's decided by reason. Based on the man's capacity to understand signification, he chooses between 4 types of actions, and then that is the thing, his reason and his choice is what it is that determines how it is that he acts. It's not some external force of just, the social environment. It comes from his reason. So Bourdieu takes a middle point with this. In the Pascalian Meditations, he writes that it is not about a milieu, like an environment that exerts itself on the individual in a form of mechanic causality. And it's not a subject which affirms itself to the world in a relationship of pure knowledge, but it is in between. It is a causality which fashions our belonging, which takes into account our understanding of our social determinations. And you can tell me in part 3 if you really see this in Schrödinger as well. It's about the causal explanation, so how it is that the social does give us determinations, and the signification subjectivisme, the subjectivism of signification. So it is, we have like our 4 types of action, but these 4 types of actions are only available within social determinations. So, pensée pascalienne, I guess this is from Pascal and not Bourdieu. It is par la pensée, je le comprends. It is from thought that I understand it. It being the space, it being social. So I hope you found this helpful. I wasn't really anticipating bringing in Bourdieu, even though we started off with ethics. And by the way, at the beginning of this book, Schrödinger mentions Spinoza, which is amazing because Spinoza is like one of my favorite philosophers as well. If you are interested in, I know this sounds like such a pluggy video, but it's just like you can't explain everything in one place. If you're interested in ethics, Spinoza's ethics, a very long time ago when I kind of just started this channel, I made like a few videos on Spinoza. I will link the one that's most applicable. And essentially you get an idea of how behaviors and relations and, you know, the fact that happiness is our capacity to act. I don't really have like a cute button to end this video, but I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it helpful seeing how it is that different structures apply to different domains, and how maybe though it is not something that you can, you know, confront with reality in the scientific sense. You know, I do this because obviously, again, if you haven't read Maya Su's Après la finitude, I definitely recommend it. It really makes you question on the foundations of science. I think it was really well argued, but this is probably a really good segue into the difference between theory and speculation. So here we have his observations of two theories, Darwin's theory and Lamarck's theory, and we're leading towards his speculations. And when I said like looking at different schemas, so maybe we can't actually use this to prove against reality in terms of a theory, a scientific theory, and yet there is actually a lot to be said about its speculations in terms of seeing the exact same or similar structures evoked by different thinkers. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful. I'll talk to you soon.